Hello and welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. I'm Fatty Hacker, and today we're going to be looking at the damage and DPS of nearly every super for the Hunter, because this is something that rarely gets talked about when doing boss damage, and I've heard many myths and tips about super damage outputs that I want to conclusively prove right or wrong. First, I wanted to get an idea of what Greg's total health is, so I can have rough estimates for damage values, even if sometimes I can't see the numbers. So I take away as close to 1/3 of his health as possible, which takes 3 crits of the sniper, which hits for 14,168 each, 1 sniper body of 4359, and 6 scout crits hitting 1733 each, for a total of 57,261. So we're going to assume his total health is 3 times that, or 171,783. Okay, first we're going to look at the Arcstrider super. None of the 3 trees have any listed differences between super damage other than the middle tree, which buffs damage after blocking a projectile, but since this is unlikely when doing boss damage, I'm just going to run one test and call it done. A triple light attack combo hits for 15,077 each time and takes exactly 2 seconds to execute, meaning it has a DPS of 22,616. The light heavy hits for 15,077 again on the lights, but a whopping 51,481 on the heavy hit. This takes 2.3 seconds, so slightly longer, but overall the DPS is 35,493, which is better, so we'll default to that value because there's no reason not to use that combo. The super lasts nearly exactly 10 seconds while using these attacks start to end, meaning its total damage is 354,985. Now, if you're going to be using this super with the intent of damage, you should be using Flux, which boosts damage and duration of the Arcstrider super on consecutive hits through a buff called Synapse Junctions, which goes all the way up to a ×3 buff. So on my first combo, I build it up and then it'll stay there. My first flurry of attacks hits for the initial base 1577 like before, but then 17,112 as the buff builds, and then with a fully charged hit on the heavy attack, we hit for 75,272. My next attack, now fully charged, hit for 22,044 on the lights, and again 75,272 with the heavy. Maintaining Synapse Junction ×3 for the full super brings the duration to 14.5 seconds, meaning we're able to get off 6 combos plus 1 light attack, because the combo takes 2.3 seconds still like before. The first combo will be charging up and hit for 107,461. The remaining 5 combos will all hit for 119,360, plus 1 extra light attack, which hits for 22,044. A total of 726,305 damage overall, and a DPS of 50,090. For Night Stalker, we have 2 supers which I will be testing, which are the middle tree Spectral Blades and the bottom tree Shadow Shot. The top only tethers once, so I don't think it's viable at all for damage. Let's start with the middle tree, which will be pretty straightforward as it only has the light attack to spam. This hits for 10,051 per hit, and hits 3 times per second, meaning the DPS is 31,653. It lasts about 11.3 seconds, meaning its total damage is 357,679. Next is bottom tree Mobius Quiver. Our first shot hits for 10,283 impact, then 41 for the suppression damage. Our next shot hits 10,283 again because the tether effects are sadly not instant. This time the tether damage does start to crit and hits for 205, and our next direct shot hits for 51,413, ticks for 205 after again, and it does this for the next 3 shots. This does a total of 227,284 damage and takes 7.5 seconds, which leaves us with a DPS of 30,305. Now, just like Arcstrider, there is an exotic that can significantly improve the performance of the super, which are the Orpheus Rigs, and they grant super energy on tethers, which makes the super last longer. And in the clip, you can see I completely butcher it, but still get off 8 shots, which is the max with Orpheus Rigs, adding 2 to our previous. These 2 are both now tethered shots, meaning we can add 103,236 damage to our previous total, bringing us up to 330,520. But it does put us at a little bit longer, 10 seconds, for a new DPS of 33,051. On to Solar Hunter supers. We're starting things off with Blade Barrage. And to be completely honest, this is why I wanted to get an idea of how much health Greg has. Counting every number is nearly impossible due to the overlap, but since we know Greg is about 171,000 health, and we just did over 2/3, I'm going to be happy saying Blade Barrage does about 115,000 damage. And it takes 2.17 seconds, so it has a DPS of 52,995. Next up is Top Tree Golden Gun, which fires 6 shots that can't crit, and is used for ad clear a lot, but let's say you're in a boss damage situation. Would it even be worth using? Each shot hits for 16,335, and as I mentioned, you get 6 shots, so the total damage is 98,010. It took 2.71 seconds to use our super, meaning the DPS is 36,166. And the last subclass we will test today is Bottom Tree Gunslinger, which only fires 3 shots, but they can crit, and each crit buffs the damage of the shot after. In my test, I may have not fired all 3 as fast as humanly possible, but for the average player, making sure they hit crits after the recoil, adjusting for flinch, I think the speed of the shots makes for a very realistic test. The first shot hits for 46,009, the second hits for 67,082, and the final shot hits for 87,452. This totals 200,543 damage and takes 3 seconds, which leaves us with a DPS of 66,848. One thing that's very important to note is that when I activated my super, I have the buff Knock 'em Down active with over 20 seconds left on it, which gives my super a 30% damage bonus, so these numbers would be a bit lower without it. But realistically, most people running this subclass are using the Celestial Nighthawk, so for our last test, it's time to see how much damage we can do with this exotic equipped, which combines our golden gun shots into one. We hit for 212,349 total damage, and the time from shot to recovered state takes basically a full second, so the DPS is 212,349. Nighthawk is unaffected by the Knock 'em Down perk, so it will be the same damage either way. Finally, my thoughts on all this. First, one thing that shocked me was the sustained damage of the Spectral Blades. Each slash was such low damage, and I never see hunters running it in PvE, so I assumed it wouldn't be great, but it actually performed pretty well. Another thing that caught me off guard was how little of an increase in damage Nighthawk does for Golden Gun. Every time I hear someone talk about it, the idea that it is equivalent to firing 6 shots always gets brought up, when in reality it is barely better than shooting your usual 3. The major benefit that still comes from it though is saving time. You can fire your 3 shots as one and get back to doing damage with your weapons. However, I think this proves that it's not as necessary as people have thought before, so if you want to run a different exotic that gives a significant increase to your strength and moment-to-moment gameplay, I think that's completely fine to run over the Nighthawk. And finally, I knew Raiden Flux was good, but it feels like people have stopped using it since Mobius Quiver Orpheus Rigs took over. And granted, the benefit of Tether is that you boost everyone else's damage as well, but the damage coming from the Arcstrider with Raiden Flux is absolutely insane. I'm also impressed by how things are more balanced than I thought by their inverse relation of damage to DPS, which ensures no super is best for everything. I would say there are 3 major factors in determining which super to go with if you intend to use it for damage. The first thing is how big is your opening to attack. In some strikes, the boss is only vulnerable for a short period of time, and in that case, high DPS, low damage is beneficial. The next thing I would say is ammo economy. In a raid, we can assume you've rallied to a banner, you're sitting on full ammo, and if this is the case, bursting out a high DPS super then switching back to your Izanagi's or whatever it is better than taking 10 seconds to spam tethers or use another sustaining damage super. In an activity like Gambit, however, I find that quite often I get to the boss and have no power ammo. This is a situation where I would probably take a higher damage super instead. Something like the sustained output and high damage of Spectral Blades would actually outperform the burst from Blade Barrage if all you have to fall back on is a primary weapon after it. And lastly, the boss itself in terms of its crit, its positioning, and its movement. If it sits still and has a nice big eye or whatever to shoot at, take high DPS, get back to your weapons because you can use them as fast as possible. If it flails around and it's really close to you, you can probably benefit from a roaming super. The very last important thing to keep in mind is that super damage cannot be buffed like weapons. It benefits from debuffs on enemies, but sitting in a well or passing through a bubble will provide no benefit, while these can massively increase weapon damage, especially when multiplying with the debuffs. With all that in mind, I hope you are better equipped to decide what super to run in each activity if you're playing Hunter. Thanks for watching. If you learned something and want to see more Destiny videos in the future, make sure to subscribe.